But my contention is I don't have to get to it because everybody's sick of me saying it. I think at a level of capability, Fuller did it better than anybody else. We have at a level of capability, not the existing, but it's capability. It's not the reality that we've inherited outdated institutions. We've transcended material scarcity
30 seconds.
as an ontologic reality. There is enough for all there never has been. That's a thing that I think, but that's a thing that's a little hard for anybody to give any sense to because everybody's starving. But we're going to talk about you and your career, and I really,
15 seconds,
I really congratulate you on all the work. What is that again called? The thing, catastrophic.
Global
In five,
catastrophic.
4,
Global
Okay, we got
Catastrophic
it.
Risk Institute.
2, 1.
Yeah, welcome very, very much to Conversation. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the program a younger, well, yes, he's younger than me, but he's still coming into his major period of intellectual activity and so forth, and that's Seth Baum. And he's I'm happy to report, he's got his PhD from Pennsylvania State University, a PhD in geography. So, fellow geographer, there aren't many of us around. That's what I did my doctoral work in at Wayne State University in Detroit. But welcome very much, Seth, to the program. And we're going to be talking about your major institute, but welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's certainly great to be amongst another geographer.
Yes, there aren't many of us.
Not nearly as many as there should be.
You know, it was. I've had occasion to look it up. It was a major part of the curriculum, say, in 19th century Europe, was geography. It was major.
Well, it still is a major part of the curriculum in some countries, but much less in the United States,
Why would
unfortunately.
that be? Because I have a suggestion. It's because it's so comprehensive. You can be interested in climate patterns, economic patterns, political geography, you can be. It's so comprehensive or multidisciplinary.
That's certainly part of it. Over the years, a lot of universities have been very interested in focusing the research specifically on one topic and then other research on another topic. And there's been a push away from synthesis, putting it all together. And that's something that geographers have always been excellent at, is looking at the big picture across what's going on in the natural environment and in human society and putting it all together around the world. And so that's one reason that geographers have, over the years in the United States at least, gotten left out, because the university's been focusing on more narrow topics.
Could that be called reductionism?
Reductionism, exactly.
And specialization. It's just down to very, very finely tuned pieces of specialization. And nobody's going to be, and there should be a place where people are thinking the larger issues like they do in a comprehensive way, don't you think?
Now, more recently, I completely agree with that. And this is a core emphasis for my own work. More recently, there has been a bit of a trend across universities for, they call it interdisciplinary research that integrates across different disciplines, or there's even a better word, transdisciplinary.
I see
research.
that word. I hadn't read it.
It means research that transcends the disciplines. And this is a lot of what my group does and my colleagues, where we basically ignore the existence of disciplines and study topics and study them however we feel can most effectively make progress on these topics.
Very good. I have a friend, Mark Stallman. If you're watching, Mark, hello. But his dad, and a lot of it has to do with the extensions of consciousness that technology is. And now we're coming into an information age, and we're transcending literacy at a certain level and linear thinking. But his dad was in the room with Norbert Wiener, the great giant cyberneticist.
Cybernetics, that's right. Yeah.
And Norbert Wiener used to say, and they do say in cybernet, Ray Kurzweil and so forth, they say information overload. We're getting information overload with all the sensory capability we're able to have available to us now compared out of history. Information overload permits pattern recognition. You don't have to know all the details. It's like seeing the whole painting rather than looking at the individual dots, if you can understand. Do you think that makes any sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense, because we have so much information available to us, things that people in previous generations would have, could only have dreamed of, and it's increasingly right at our fingertips, and that makes it so much easier for us to look at the big picture, to tease out the insights, because that's the important part. It's not the little details of what happened when and all that. It's the insights for what it means for us and our lives.
But it's those little details that are being rewarded within the academic process by you getting down into what is quantum mechanics, or getting down into the individual, it's specialization.
Well,
is what's being heralded.
This is one reason that we started the institute that I'm part of, and we started it outside of the university world. We work with a lot of people in universities, but we have a space where we can study freely the topics as we see fit without getting caught up in, is it part of this department or that department?
Yeah, thank you. I was in the same. I remain in that. I'm interested. I'm going to just say it sounds crazy. You're in the presence of. I think there should be a department at the university of everything. It's a little bit hard to imagine, but that's sort of what we're going toward.
And this is something with geography departments. They're not departments of everything. They do have their focus.
Sure, they do.
But what they do, and they do this really well, and I had a fantastic time studying geography, is they help pull across all the insights.
Right. Well, that's pattern recognition. You're seeing patterns.
Yeah,
that's what we want to see.
In geography, we talk a lot about patterns and process. Where process, those are the processes that generate the patterns, and so you can observe the patterns, and then you can try and understand what processes produce them, and you can go back and forth between the two, look at the process, see what patterns emerge from it, and then you can look at the patterns and try and learn more about the process. It's a really great way of learning about the world.
Yeah, there should be more of that encouraged. And I think also the youth are particularly adept at that. You're younger, and you got kids coming up behind you, teenagers and things. I think that's the trend of human consciousness. And we're caught up in a thing where that's been discouraged. And we don't, and we've got institutions that were formulated within a condition, nation states, these kind of things, that very likely in terms of the future, if it's a positive future, are going to be subsumed within a larger collective pattern that represents the collective situation of evolutionary process in this part of the universe. If you can follow.
Sure, yeah. So I'm just old enough where I remember, I was quite young, I just remember our family getting its first computer.
Yeah.
People who grow, and this was before the internet was really a significant thing. People who are born today, or even born 10 years ago or so, they don't have those memories. For them, computers and the internet are just part of their reality, part of their entire human experience. And when learning about a different topic is as simple as just clicking over to a different website or a different page or something like that, to look across all the different disciplines is much easier now when you might have to go to a different part of the library or a different building on campus or something like that. Remember
we used to have to go to the stacks and get a card to get a book brought out that you could look and read a couple of paragraphs.
There still is a lot of excellent.
I spent a lot of time in the stacks.
A lot of excellent insight, a lot of excellent information that you can only get in the library. It's not all completely online.
Okay, I want to get into your thing, catastrophic and all that, because that's really important. But let's talk a little bit also, if I don't, because I went over your bio pretty good. It's impressive. You are involved in ethics and morality and such things that helped lead you in the direction where you came to now, if it's not mistaken. That's just
correct,
all. You know what I'm saying? You're interested in ethics, right?
I'm very interested in ethics.
And seriously so. Yeah, right.
Well, so ethics is, as I would put it, ethics is the study of right and wrong and what we should or shouldn't do.
Right.
And so the reason I take ethics so seriously is because if we want to live our lives in the right way or the best way or so, then it's important for us to think carefully about the basic ethic principles that we should be living our lives according to. And that's always meant a lot for me to try and live a good life, not just a fun life for myself, but a good life for the whole world. And
you have so is that a sense of collective responsibility?
In a sense.
That's a mark of what human purpose ought to be concerned with, other than how can I make a better deal?
Yeah, so for me, it all starts with ethics.
And that got you concerned with these important questions. I congratulate you on that grounding. And then you also did grounding work as an engineering kind of thing with the new emerging technologies for undergraduate study and stuff.
Yeah,
Did you not?
yeah,
That's worth
I
mentioning.
did.
Then we get down to the
Okay.
major thrust of
Well,
the program.
I come from an engineering family.
Right.
My father was an engineer. My mother's father also an engineer. And growing up, engineering was always kind of the natural direction for me. And I liked it a lot. I had a fantastic time in engineering. It's a great education to have, and
Very
it's a great
important,
it's a great perspective on the world, because what it is practical,
Yeah.
right? And so I learned a lot about how to think practically about solving problems, but also do it with advanced science and technology.
Well,
And
practical science and technology is
a lot of the most practical
pretty
things
practical.
are using
Yeah.
science and technology,
Yeah,
such
right.
as all
Mathematics
all the
itself.
equipment that's making this broadcast
I
possible.
think it's all undergirded by mathematics, and mathematics is pretty what would be called practical.
It can
Yeah,
be.
it can be, yeah.
It can be.
We just passed Pi Day, but never mind. Yeah,
And it was an important Pi Day.
yeah,
at any
right.
rate.
It was unique. It was a 100-year event.
Once in 100 years. Yeah.
Happy Pi Day.
Happy
or
Pi
happy
Day.
post Pi Day. Yeah, yeah.
So I studied engineering.
Yeah.
I studied engineering as an undergraduate, and then as a master's student. I was at the University of Rochester as an undergraduate.
Is it
So I got a
Eastman
lot of
Kodak.
yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that right?
That's,
Yeah,
that's
right,
up,
yeah,
upstate,
yeah.
upstate New
Yeah,
York.
right, uh-huh.
Got a lot of snow.
Yeah,
It's fun.
I know. Yeah,
I had a
sick as-
fantastic time there.
Yeah.
And then I did master's work this was in electrical engineering at Northeastern University.
Uh-huh.
And as I was looking at what I was going to do for my PhD,
Yeah.
that's when I really started thinking about, maybe,
Geography.
well, I'll tell you how I got to geography,
Okay, yeah.
because that's a bit of
I
a
like
jump.
where you
I had-
landed, brother. Yeah,
It was a career switch of,
Yeah.
of sorts,
Yeah.
right? From electrical engineering to geography. I'm not the only person who's made that switch, but it's certainly not what most people in electrical engineering
I think
end
you're
up
on a
doing.
road toward which there will be a great deal of trending, because it gets you over to thinking about the bigger picture. That's what I
So
think
this
we
is-
need
this
above
is
all
why I
else,
did it,
and the youth
because
yearns for.
When I was in engineering, I was at the same time involved in like community service,
Yeah.
things like that,
Yeah.
how to help out, and that got me thinking about. And this is where the ethics comes
Yeah.
in. In engineering, we work on design problems. I try to make this certain type of tool
Yeah.
or so work better. Really important work. But I was meanwhile thinking about, okay, so which engineering design problems should we be solving, and can we really figure that out very well?
How
Well,
about
that's-
anticipatory design? How does that thought, where you're thinking about the implications of it? Because that was the basis of a person your wife is interested in, having met with her.
Yeah.
Lovely lady. Congratulations,
Thank
you
you.
lucky fellow, to have such a lovely lady in your corner. Buckminster Fuller, his whole thing was summed up: anticipatory design science.
Yeah.
That you're going to be anticipatorily seeing the effects of what the new technologies offer.
So that idea right there, that's
Because you deal with risk, and risk is part of the banking process, part of the whole part. There's risk in everything, so we're tying some things together here. But
yeah,
if
that
you understand-
idea about anticipatory design, that's a little bit more sophisticated than where I was thinking when I was still an engineering student.
Yeah, but
I completely agree
No, but
right
you're-
now
you're-
that's
you're-
important.
You're getting there.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's called advancement. Yeah, good, right. Yeah.
So I finished in the reason I switched out of engineering is I also wanted to think about these ethical questions.
Yeah.
What should we be working on?
Right.
And get into policy and
Yeah.
the social side of it, the human
Economics,
side, a little bit of economics.
yeah.
And that's how I ended up in geography, because
Yeah.
it's one of the few places on
Yeah.
campus where you can, still have one leg in the engineering and the natural science and all
Right.
that, and have the other leg in policy and ethics and
Right.
social science, all at the same time, and nobody thinks you're odd for trying to do that, because they're all doing the same thing.
I wonder
That's
if you're
really
ever
how I
going to
ended
have
up in geography.
are we ever going to have, if we get a department of everything, let's say we have a department of everything, and and all media and everything like that, and I got a PhD in everything.
Okay.
I don't suppose that's really available, but anyway, that's just off the side.
Sure.
But anyway, I want to get down to the major thing. You're now associated with this thing, very serious work about assessing risk,
Yes.
catastrophic risk.
Yes, global catastrophic. The
Yeah.
organization's called the Global Catastrophic Risk Institute.
Okay, and you gave a wonderful presentation for Helen Caldecott.
Thank you.
And as I understand, you just did a thing with Jeffrey, with Sachs?
Jeffrey
You had
Sachs
you had
and
a-
Max Tegmark, yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting in touch with a lot of very responsible people for sort of the major questions that evolve around the risk to the Homo sapiens species. But share how that got started and how that's a major focus of your concern now. These various levels of risk that are inherent in the ontology or the reality in which we are we're thinking and creating our policy decisions and so forth.
Well, it really follows very directly from the ethics. In simplest terms, if we are trying to make the world a better place, then we need to work, or not just make the world a better place, but make it as much of a better place as we can.
Okay, that's I was talking about risk, because then you're going to be considering things that are on the other side of making it a better place.
Making things better, but making things better, this includes preventing things from getting worse.
Well, there's a philosophy in there somewhere that would really sound good over a beer, I think. But anyway, but you understand what I'm saying. You're dealing with risk, and much of the human's experience is dealing with the whole bond market and the whole economic paradigm and the Dow Jones and all of this and everything. There's risk. There's risk that is and they got algorithmic ways of dealing with risk in terms of investment. It's a big principle, but you're dealing with the things that exist that are catastrophic.
For
the extensions of human capability that are catastrophic, like atomic bombs, global warming, biological weapons, these kind of things that are at risk, maybe even at a species level, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, that's what your concern is.
These are the risks of catastrophe so big they could permanently end human civilization.
That I don't think there's any doubt of,
Yeah, and the reason these are so important is because if we really do care about not just ourselves, not just our immediate friends and family, and we should care about our friends and family, but if we really care about everyone, and this is a basic moral point, that we should care about everyone in the world,
and the ecology,
and maybe the ecology as well. But if we do care about everyone, not just now but also into the future, right? Then a catastrophe that could permanently end the whole of human civilization, and that could mean the loss of life for billions of people all around the world, and countless members of countless future generations into the whole future.
They'd go.
So if you're
with
looking
them,
from the ethics, if you're looking for a way to make the world a better place, a much better place, anything we can do to reduce the risk of that enormously large catastrophe, that's a really important thing to do.
Is there, when Rome came to an end and Tacitus went and they looked after 300 years, they had ruled for 1,000 years, ancient Rome, right? They had ruled for 1,000 years. They fell apart, and that would be like a catastrophe that would be seen by the Romans.
Sure.
But there were people in the Americas didn't know anything about it. They were separated and everything. So it would be a localized risk that has always been, but what you're talking about is risks that are inherent to our time, newly, or are you?
Well, some of these risks...
risk is a big thought.
Some of these risks have always existed. Like a large, smallpox. But for example, a large asteroid impact, right? This is what, to the best of our knowledge, killed all the dinosaurs.
65 million years ago. Yucatan.
Yucatan, exactly. So these risks have always existed, even before any humans have existed, and the risk from asteroids still exists.
That's still the one things you have on your list.
It's on our list, but the probabilities there are much smaller. Same thing for a massive volcano eruption. And there actually was a massive volcano eruption about 75,000 years ago. This is in Toba. It's in Indonesia. You can look it up. There's a Lake Toba right now. That used to be a mountain. How do you get from a mountain to a lake? Well, you erupt. You explode it, and there's a massive volcano eruption 75,000 years ago that our ancestors might have come close to going extinct. And none of this would exist 75,000 years ago.
Exactly. To blacken the sky globally.
Well, there weren't that many humans around the world at that time. That's 75,000 years ago. But the biggest... 75,000 is this eruption of...
And they got clear evidence of that?
The eruption certainly happened.
That's a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
the eruption certainly happened sometime around then. As far as how
catastrophic... And there was culture there.
as far as how
Where was it?
catastrophic
Indonesia?
Indonesia, it's called Toba, T-O-B-A.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and as far as how catastrophic that was to humanity, that's a much more difficult question because you have to do the archaeology of digging up the populations and see how it affected them, and there's just not that much available to us for us to study.
Could I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I had my DNA. Have you had your DNA done?
No.
The DNA is new technology that's coming, right?
Yeah.
And my sister had to do it. It was one of my birthdays. I'm trying not to remember all my birthdays. There's so damn many of them. But she had me do it. And you take your swab on your cheek and you send it in, and they get your DNA. If you're male, it's Y chromosome, and females, it's a mitochondria. But they did that, and it came back. Spencer Wells, National Geographic. It's scientifically solid.
Okay.
They came back and they had markers. They had 5 markers that came back from my Y chromosome, which, as I understand it, relates me as an individual to an individual that existed in the past. And that individual could be identified where that individual was, an individual.
Okay.
And it went back to, I forgot now, it was, I think, 60,000 years ago.
My gosh, wow.
I related me as an individual to an individual. I think they're getting ready to try and do that for all of humanity. There was a little cost, a few bucks. But they're going to get it done. They're going to get that because we all come out of Africa. And they want to know the migrational pattern. That would be a risk. That would be a pattern that would be relevant.
Oh
to
yeah, no,
understanding
it's a
that
fascinating story
You ought
because
to have
what we look at is what scale of catastrophe is the human species capable of surviving, and the fact that we did survive that massive eruption 75,000 years ago, because we're here now. Obviously, our ancestors survived it.
I've not heard. How come I've not heard of that? I got to go to this site called. What's it called? Your site?
My organization is gcrinstitute.org.
Yeah, but that stands for
Global Catastrophic Risk Institute.
Global Catastrophic Risk Institute would be a major site that people can go to get the reading of the real dangers in a large scale. Perhaps you must have been tracking others that are close to on or taking that kind of data and making it available as well.
Sure.
So this is a major research tool for understanding one possible projection of the human scenario into the future that is to be taken account of.
And the story.
And I congratulate you and your colleagues.
Thank you.
It's very rich. Yeah.
Yeah. The story of the Toba volcano eruption. It's so powerful because we can imagine this happened 75,000 years ago, and here we sit today, looking back on that.
If that had worked, my relative wouldn't have been there. A mere 60,000.
A mere would not be there.
Just think about it.
And none of us ever.
Have there been many events like that within what we came out of Homo erectus about 200,000 years ago?
Something like
10,000 generations. More or less,
yeah. So the Toba.
Have there been many events like that?
The Toba eruption was by far the biggest.
That's a mark. That's like a marker.
To the best of my knowledge, and again, I said the archaeology. There's not a lot of evidence that we have to learn from it. But to the best of my knowledge, that was probably the closest that humanity's ever come to going extinct.
Wow.
And so everything...
Thank you for that.
Everything
and you and the audience. That's really data that's
everything
important.
that has ever come from our species ever since then depends on the fact that we survived.
Yes, right.
And so likewise today, the threats that exist to our survival as a global species today, everything that could go into, come from us,
that's what you
tens of thousands, millions of years into the future. Think about all those future people looking back on us, right? We need to survive all the threats that we're facing today in order for all of those future generations to have the chance to live, just like our existence depends on our ancestors having survived that eruption.
That's right. That's absolutely true. That's a very useful thing. And you got to. Do you have them? Let's just take off. The one that comes obviously to mind are the weapon systems that have gone nuclear and thermonuclear and all of that. Then there's people are talking about global warming. They're talking about biological and pandemics that could come and that. How do you assess them? Do you say which is the one that is the most likely to be relevant, and what are the the percentages or the odds of one thing happening, and how do we study it, and what do we do? How do you how many do you recognize, and how do you relate them one to the other?
Well, so there you go, being
A pattern recognizer.
being a little bit of
No.
being a little bit of a reductionist.
Well, no,
there,
asking for some of those
because-
details within that
Yeah.
pattern. You know,
No,
how
no,
many
no,
shades
so
of
this
green
is,
are
This
there?
is something that comes up a lot. People
Yeah, I
ask
bet,
me, as
yeah.
somebody who studies these catastrophic risks,
yeah.
which ones should we be most worried about?
Or-
but something I tell them is that, in a certain way, that's not actually the right question
Okay,
to ask.
tell me the right
because
question and answer.
so one reason,
Yeah.
and you'll like this,
Yeah.
is because the risks are interrelated.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And
yeah.
so for example, the environmental risks, two of the
Okay.
big ones, you have global warming
Yeah.
and you have biodiversity loss.
Okay.
Well, a lot of biodiversity loss is caused by global warming.
Okay.
A lot of biodiversity loss is also caused by other things.
Yeah.
Some of those other things also cause global warming. So these
Okay.
are very interrelated risks.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
right. Okay,
but
fair
if you
enough.
if you
Yeah,
look
yeah.
through all the different risks, they're interrelated, and so it's difficult to say is one more likely than the other, because in a certain sense they're not actually different risks.
Okay, I'm trying to understand it. It's a pattern. You're talking about a pattern.
Yeah,
And you want to understand the
yeah.
overall pattern. Okay,
And so,
fair enough.
So I'm,
yeah.
I'm interested
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
ultimately what I'm most interested in
Yes.
is not what should we be most worried about, although that is a very important question, analyzing, understanding the risks, whether it's each risk separately or looking at how they relate to each other. That's really the starting point for understanding them. And then ultimately the bottom line is what are the best, the most effective ways of reducing the risk in practical terms. Now you asked about which risks should we be most worried about. I can say a little bit about that.
Okay, I appreciate your pattern you present. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So I can say a little bit about that.
yeah.
It depends on the time scale we're looking at.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about a major global catastrophe to happen, say, this year or next year, in the very immediate
very
future,
immediate, yeah.
the two things that really stand out are a nuclear war
Yeah.
and a major disease outbreak.
Major disease Ebola
outbreak,
thing.
right?
Yeah,
so
right,
so
right.
the Ebola one, in the form that it existed and continues to exist, this problem's not over yet.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's really important that we get the number of cases down to 0, so because otherwise it can spread back out again.
Yeah.
So it's very important to get it down to
Particularly
0.
when you got something you don't have a handle on, anything toward a vaccine or any way of dealing with it. It's really
So
scary.
with
yeah.
Ebola, I don't know what the status is for vaccines on Ebola, but Ebola, as I understand it, is something that is less likely to cause major trouble all around the world
Then what?
than, say, certain types of flu.
Okay.
We've seen the H1N1 or the bird flu. I can't remember which flu is which,
Bird-
but
yeah.
we've had a number of flu scares
We
over
had
the
a big
last 5 or
flu-
10 years or so.
We had a big flu thing in 1918 in this country.
That was one of the biggest disease
Yeah.
outbreaks ever.
Have you run
the-
into a guy named Joshua Lederberg?
Joshua Lederberg. The name sounds
Oh, he's
familiar.
a major guy who studied this stuff. I think
Yeah.
he's passed now.
Okay.
Beautiful guy, yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if a major catastrophe is going to happen in, say, the next 12 months or so, or next few years,
Yeah.
a nuclear war or a disease outbreak those stand out as the most likely scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
As you get further into the future, upcoming decades or even
Centuries.
further, then, okay, so global warming is a very interesting one because it's different from something like a war or a pandemic because it happens relatively slowly. Global warming is already happening and we're already feeling the effects of it, something that here in New York City we know quite well from Hurricane Sandy that rolled through town quite recently. But global warming
Do you
doesn't...
think that's directly attributable to that?
Parts of it.
Okay, okay.
I would say the storm or a storm like that quite possibly would have happened anyway without global warming, but the effects of it were worse because of global warming.
Okay.
A simple example is the sea level has been rising, and as we learned so vividly during Hurricane Sandy, the height of the sea level is a huge factor in how severe the damage is.
Yeah, I go to the Veterans Hospital down on 23rd and First Avenue here. I'm a veteran of the military. And it was just devastated. They were closed down for a couple of years
And
getting
that's
it back
because
together.
so much
Yeah.
I can't speak to that specific
Yeah,
hospital,
yeah.
but across the city, it's because so much water
Uh-huh.
got in. It wasn't from the wind, it was the water
Yeah, yeah.
that caused, I mean, the wind caused damages too. Up in my neighborhood, a tree fell over.
Uh-huh.
That was from the wind, not from the water. But the water caused, the subways were flooding.
Yeah,
in-
right,
in
right.
places, and that's only going to get worse. But it's gradual.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a nuclear war where the bombs go off and things change much more.
Would you say, if
rapidly.
you're trying to rate these, and I know you're not, you're seeing it all as a
Yeah.
pattern, I respect that, and that's something that we should be thinking that way. But it would seem to me the most immediate thing that we could see happening next weekend or something would be the weapons being
Yeah.
unleashed.
And the
And
other
what
thing,
their capability is.
the other thing
for
about
destruction
the
or death.
nuclear weapons is right now, and this is maybe a little under the radar. It's a
Yeah.
great one for people to be learning about. Right now, there are actually excellent opportunities to reduce the risk
Mm-hmm.
from nuclear weapons. That there are, and I'll say a little bit about this. There's a number of different things going on around the world to help
Yeah.
out reducing the risk of nuclear weapons. One thing that I'm really interested in, and I'm honored to have had the chance to contribute to this a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a new initiative about 5 years old on the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons use.
Yeah, spell it out, please.
Humanitarian impacts. So
Yeah.
what they do is draw attention to the humanitarian crises that would occur, even if a single nuclear weapon would go off. And certainly if there was a large-scale nuclear war, then the humanitarian impacts are just that much more
Do
severe.
they try to model on the basis of if one goes off or if the whole full tilt boogie, it's all exchanged in a massive hatred and everything just goes?
Yeah.
Do they ever? Do they
looking-
model all the way from one to all of them, ever? Or who does model what that is and so on? How do we get some idea of projecting what it might mean?
Well, the
because
modeling-
you're studying risk.
Yeah, the modeling that I'm most familiar with is it's called nuclear winter.
Yeah,
This is the global environmental consequences
Yeah.
of nuclear weapons use.
Cloud cover.
It's a really grim story
Mm-hmm.
because it comes from you detonate a nuclear weapon, say in a city, right? That city burns and it
Yeah.
creates an enormous firestorm,
Yeah.
and it's the smoke from the burning of the city rises high up into the atmosphere, up
and
past the
blocks out.
clouds,
Yeah, blocks
up
the sun.
into, so the atmosphere has multiple layers.
Yes.
The troposphere down at the
Yeah,
bottom.
right.
You're a geographer, you
Yeah.
might know this.
Yeah.
And the clouds sit towards the top of the troposphere. And then the next is the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Some of the smoke will make it up past the clouds into the stratosphere. Since it's up there, the air doesn't mix across the layers as much. There's no clouds to rain it out, so the smoke stays up there for years.
And blocks the sun.
Maybe even 10 or 20 years. It'll spread all around the world, blocks the sun, as you're saying.
Yeah.
The temperatures on the surface get colder. There's less precipitation. It doesn't rain
Right.
and snow and all that as much. And we get less sunlight. It's terrible for plants, right? It's really difficult to grow plants. And so there's talk about there could be a global famine.
Yes.
With not even all of the nuclear weapons. They talk about if there's a nuclear war with, say, 100 nuclear weapons. This is the scenario, the nuclear war scenario that gets studied the most with this.
Are you talking nuclear or thermonuclear? Or do they?
No,
How much modeling is
one,
done? That's
so
what I
so the
wonder.
scenario they look at is a hypothetical nuclear war between India and Pakistan.
That's very dangerous territory.
So, yeah. And
Feelings
with,
are very high.
with 100 nuclear weapons that are, the size of those weapons is about 15 kilotons, which is about the same size as what we had in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So these are not the enormous, megaton nuclear weapons. These are relatively small nuclear weapons in this hypothetical scenario. And so with just 50 weapons on each side, they simulate a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, and then they model. This is the modeling part. They model the smoke going up into the stratosphere, and then they model what happens to the global environment for the next, say, 20 years after that. And this is they're using global climate models that simulate what happens with temperature and precipitation all around the world given these environmental conditions. And it's tough. It's really difficult. The conditions that the world would be faced with even in a relatively small nuclear war, because India and Pakistan, they have a much smaller number of nuclear weapons compared to, in particular, the United States and
You're just
and
modeling
Russia.
the Hiroshima brand. You're not into the Trident submarines or the what do you call the hydrogen weapons that are 20, 40
So
times the strength of the original.
the larger the weapon is, the more it can burn.
Thermonuclear, yeah.
The more it can burn. This is not happy stuff.
No, no.
This is not happy stuff at all. But the larger the weapon, the more it can burn, and it'll put more smoke up into.
Same process.
Same process. It's just a firestorm. It's just the burning of cities and stuff.
Yeah. Has anybody modeled an all-out Trident submarines, our fleet, Soviet Union, and unleashing of the weapons of the Soviet Union, and then whatever little things the other nuclear powers could add to that and everything? What the overall cumulative effect of an all-out spasm of hatred, unleashing of the total? Has anybody ever tried to measure or model that?
Yeah, so most of the research on the nuclear winter, just to clarify, has been on that one scenario.
Yeah, okay,
However, there have been some studies of mostly just focusing on if the United States and Russia, because we have 95, maybe even 98% of all of the nuclear weapons,
Right.
if we, hopefully this will never happen, but if we actually had a nuclear war against each other, how much smoke from those firestorms, and it's quite a lot more. That's the reason that they call it nuclear winter, is because you could have so much cooling that you get winter temperatures, you get below freezing temperatures all year round.
Okay.
And you can, as you can imagine, you
There
can't
goes your
grow
agriculture.
anything. Yeah, you can't grow any agriculture.
Yeah, we're within a very narrow range.
And so with
miracle range, Goldilocks.
With the smaller. With the smaller India, Pakistan, 100 nuclear weapon scenario, you don't get down that cold. You still get cold enough that we have less agriculture, but we still have some. With the U.S., Russia, that full-scale scenario, there's so much burning that you could even have freezing, at least for a year or so afterwards, freezing temperatures all year round. We just have to hope we have enough food lying around to keep people alive.
How about immediate deaths and so forth? Or is there, I've used the term, maybe I shouldn't use it, it's irresponsible. I say it seems to me the weapons have become, at some point in the relatively recent history, species lethal for the Homo sapiens species.
This is a big...
We were talking about the volcano out of Indonesia.
So this is a big point of uncertainty.
Okay.
And has been over the years some disagreement, some dispute over whether a nuclear war would in fact kill everyone on the planet. Because the initial explosions, highly lethal, would only hit certain cities, maybe a large number of cities, but some people in other places in different parts of the world would not be hit by them. Under pretty much any nuclear war scenario you can imagine. We wouldn't blanket the entire planet in bombs. It's just that wouldn't happen. We're pretty sure about that. But the question is,
yeah, and we have been having agreements to come down on the number that exists, right?
Fortunately, and it should come
down
even further.
What was the peak? You have those figures in your head.
Yeah, it was around 65,000.
Between the two?
There.
Between the two?
Mostly, the United States.
Would that have been
and
at the time of the
Soviet
Cuban
Union.
Missile? What was that?
No, that would be
60?
after that. In the
that
70s
peak,
and 80s.
Right? Yeah.
It was in the 80s where the nuclear disarmament movement really got hold. Reagan and Gorbachev actually helped lead that process, and it's continued ever since, and continues now, but it needs to get down a lot further.
But that's the number one that comes to mind, and then it seems to me in terms of the risk thing. Could I ask you another question?
Sure.
That whatever it is, I mean, let's just for the heck of it, we're just talking intellectually over coffee or something, and whether it's incorrect or absolutely absurd to use the term species lethal for the entire Homo sapiens. I see people using it. I don't know if it's based on reliable or rational modeling or something, but it's almost existentially new. I mean, Second World War was no chance of that ever happening. We had a couple of little bombs and a howitzer and you know, that kind of thing. And we had some difficulty things. We had some chemical weapons that were pretty destructive, but we weren't anywhere near even giving that any contemplation. Is it ridiculous to think of it? Is it a ridiculous proposition to think black winter or black winter, nuclear winter or nuclear, thermonuclear winter or something, that it may be that after 200,000 years, we've reached that existential, because that would essentially be reading human history within an evolutionary pattern. That would be stopping, like the dinosaurs, or stopping a trend of evolution that has been going on for what, 3.8 billion years or something. Do you understand what it is? Is it an existentially new kind of thing that we finally come upon through our extended technological capability, or not?
So, I mean,
or is that irresponsible to even bring it up?
No, I would say certainly not at all irresponsible to bring up. In a certain way, we can't know the answer to this, right?
Can't just do a test.
You can't just do a test. You can't run the, like, okay, we're going to set up a test planet with a test civilization.
It was funny in Chicago.
We're gonna have a nuclear war there.
Yeah.
We're going to see. We're going to test. We're going to do the science. Let's see how large of a nuclear war it takes to kill everyone.
But
you can't do
modeling is meant to do that. That's what modeling is supposed to try and be able to do, and they can do it with derivatives and with all kinds of stuff.
We can learn
quotations and things on risk.
It's all dealing with risk.
Yeah.
But with this specific question, would a nuclear war of a certain size cause the extinction of the entire human species?
Is it irresponsible to say?
It is not irresponsible to ask.
It would have been
something
in 1925.
Well, we didn't have nuclear weapons back then.
That's
We
what
barely even had the idea of it.
What I'm trying to make a point for is this is not your normal period in terms of evolution.
Nuclear weapons are just one thing that we can have a serious conversation about that plausibly could end the entire species. So could a nuclear war kill everyone? It's tough to say whether it would, but as far as I'm able to tell from my own studies of this, it seems like it potentially could. Potentially could.
Now you got to get down onto percentages. Is that potential 1% or is that 99%? Or, what I'm trying to do is get, with algorithms, they get down to where everything is much more carefully calibrated and everything. How carefully are we able to judge these things of risk?
We don't have good numbers for that yet. This is something that the research is too early, too premature to really put good numbers on it.
Okay.
But in practical terms, this is where I put my engineering hat back on.
Good to see you, Mr. Edison.
In practical terms, all that we really need to know is that the probabilities of these things happening, right, and the stakes, the severity if it does happen, right,
that would be.
It is plenty high enough for this to be a major priority, a major focus for us to reduce the risk.
Okay,
and as far as what we can do to reduce the risk, the specific things we can do. So much of that doesn't really depend that much on whether the probability is 1% or 10% or 100% or something like that.
Big difference in that.
A huge difference, but we're going to want to do a lot of the same things regardless of whether it's 1% or 100%.
Oh, okay. Spell that out.
Sure.
You mean defensively against the risk?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well,
Build a dike
so for
or
example, this is a perfect example. I was saying earlier about there's this new initiative across the international community on the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons use, right? And it comes out of civil society from nonprofit, non-governmental organizations, and also a lot of the countries that themselves do not have nuclear weapons. Countries like Norway and Mexico and Austria have been leading this process alongside non-governmental organizations. The one is called ICAN, the International Coalition or Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons.
Yeah, and Helen Caldicott has been a great leader.
Has been
wonderful. Yeah,
part of it, and so she invited some people from that ICAN
that was a great
organization
seminar
to her event.
Yeah,
and so what they do is draw attention to the humanitarian catastrophe that would be even if a single nuclear weapon is used, right? And by doing that, they help the countries that have nuclear weapons, help them realize that, okay, these are weapons that we need to make sure we never use. And hopefully, this is the hope with this whole initiative, and I think it has a very good chance of succeeding, of convincing countries that they need to reduce the number of nuclear weapons that they have. They need to disarm their weapons.
Hasn't that been going on?
It's been going on. It's a little bit stalled, and I think it could really use the proverbial kick in the butt in order to get it moving again. And so this initiative is it's got its laces tied. It's ready to do some kicking. And so the question was about, does it matter whether it's 1% or 10% or 100%? This process, the Humanitarian Initiative on Nuclear Weapons, they are saying, pushing the world in a lot of the same directions, whether it's a single nuclear weapon detonation, like from a terrorist attack or an accident or something like that, to a full-scale nuclear war. That's all part of the same conversation. So for a lot of this, the difference between one nuclear weapon being used and 5,000 nuclear weapons being used is in some ways not that important of a distinction.
Could the one be triggering the other? Because what
that's
happens,
a whole different issue.
That gets into, irrationality, because actually the use of it is irrational in the outset. I mean, in the figuring.
Well, it depends on what your goals are.
Well, if you've got a great deal of tension, geopolitical, economic tension in the world now.
Yeah, well,
we see how the election
goes. Is not going to help the economy.
As we're talking about an election in Israel. That is a very, Mr. Obama's team, or Mr. Kerry, is arguing or trying to get a thing to go with Iran, and so you're aware, and it's a thing of great concern, And also, did you do much geopolitics, linking politics and geography?
Well,
I did quite a bit.
I mean,
and economic geography.
It's hard not to when you're talking about something like nuclear weapons, or global warming for that matter, right? Where in nuclear weapons, you have the big difference between the countries who have nuclear weapons, including the United States, and the countries that don't have nuclear weapons. And then within the countries that do, United States, you look at who are our adversaries, what are the countries that these weapons potentially could be aimed towards, countries like Russia, or China, maybe North Korea. And sure, even with the Ukraine crisis that's been going on, it's made tensions worse. But it's unlikely that the United States and Russia would end up using nuclear weapons over Ukraine. Not impossible, but it's unlikely.
I've put forth a scenario with seeing the time in which we live, which is hard because we see a historical thing going back 200,000 years. We don't have very much reading until the Neolithic, about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, of what actually was going on. But I was trying to say that this is an abnormally pregnant or time. In evolutionary theory, they say that you have a steady state. Homo erectus, apparently, there was Homo erectus out of which Homo sapien came 200,000 years after 4 to 5 million years. Something happened. It's called punctuated equilibrium. There's a new thing appears and so forth. And we're coming down to a time of qualitative transformation of the human scenario and the Earth in that kind of species term. Perhaps. That's what I'm it's not your normal time when you can get down to where we could not have modeled that with any sense of anything in 1900. We were impotent in terms of destroying.
So it's actually even bigger than that.
Bigger than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we have right here on Earth, within the human civilization, right now, this year, next year, the next couple of decades, however long it takes us to get through this, could be a critical issue, critical moment for the entire universe.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Not just for right here on Earth, because so first of all, what about the rest of the universe? For all we know, we are the only intelligent civilization that has ever or may ever exist in the entire universe. We've been looking.
As strange as that may seem, that may be the case.
That it might not be.
Now we got string theory, we got parallel universes.
And there may be. It's entirely possible that there are other civilizations out there and we just haven't found them yet. It's entirely possible.
Okay, there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot out there. Yeah.
Or maybe they're so far away that we can't ever find them.
Carl Sagan was looking with SETI. You know, we haven't heard anything yet.
It's
But anyway,
still a work in progress. And, but so far we haven't found any other intelligent civilizations. So for all we know, this could be the universe's only chance to do something truly special, right? And I like to say it is indeed a small world after all. They got that one right.
Thank you, Mr. Disney.
Thank you, Mr. Disney. But it is a very large galaxy, and the rest of the universe is even bigger than that.
Don't forget, parallel universes are very real possible.
Yeah, I got my fingers crossed that that it is possible for us to outlive our own universe. I mean, first step, outlive our own planet, right? Well, okay, that actually isn't even the first step. The first step is to outlive our own destructive potential, which is what we're staring down right now. But that really speaks to how
inhabiting
big
a planet in our solar system, maybe as a way station toward getting ahead or something.
Well,
you're not talking about instantiated avatars or something like that. That they're talking.
Okay.
But
step one, we need to survive. Right, we need to keep our civilization intact.
Well, I wonder if the dinosaurs did that at their time.
They tried and they failed.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
They tried and they failed. We need to succeed where the dinosaurs failed, right? We need to keep our civilization intact.
Now you're talking succeed to survive a major unleashing of the weapons. Now you say, is that what we're saying?
Well, better yet, make sure the weapons don't get unleashed in the first place. But
Okay.
if they do, we need to survive. And it's not just the weapons; it's the diseases. It's It's the environmental changes.
The whole panoply of what you guys are studying.
All of these threats that we have, we need to survive all of them. And as our technology progresses, new ones pop up. So we need to survive all of this, right? Get our civilization stabilized so we're not in such a perilous position, and then we need to eventually, and we got plenty of time for this, so it's no rush, but we do need to spread out beyond Earth into the rest of the solar system, the rest of the galaxy, and beyond.
Human beings, you mean?
Or our descendants, whatever those end up being.
Descendants of ours would be part of the human
experience. Just to put this in context, right? We're talking much longer timescales for that. The threats to the survival of our civilization, those are immediate. Those could happen right now, or next year, next decade or so. Those are very immediate. This is the first order of business. To make it off of planet Earth, we actually have about 5 billion years for that. 5 billion years. Why? Because the sun gradually gets warmer and larger, and this is very well understood. This basic astronomy. We understand how stars evolved. This is very well understood. In about 5 billion years, it becomes too hot for life as we know it to exist on Earth.
Yeah, that's coming no matter what.
Nothing we can do about that. As far as we can tell, maybe there is, but we have 5 billion years to worry about that.
But billion is a big B.
That's a big B.
That's a lot.
No rush for that. It needs to happen, but our
and
descendants,
it's going to happen.
Our descendants can worry about that. What we need to worry about that is making sure that they have the chance to. And so this is why our period of history, right here, right now, is of literally galactic, literally astronomical, cosmic significance.
Evolutionarily?
Because if we manage to survive the threats to our civilization that exist right now, if we manage to survive these threats, then our descendants, maybe not even that far into the future, will have the chance to spread out beyond our home planet and achieve things on a much larger scale than what we have here on Earth today.
Okay,
right?
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's
so it's a small world after all, but we could achieve much more. You were asking about, okay, what's the opposite of going extinct? Well, that's it.
Yin and yang.
Spreading out so big and so much that we could accomplish.
That's an escape valve, possible.
Well, it's an escape valve, but it's also
like a lifeboat off the Titanic.
It's also an opportunity, right? There's much more opportunity off this planet than there is on it.
Okay, within the generally,
Earth's a fantastic planet, but it's small. It's only one planet. There's a lot more out there.
Yeah, but it's pretty unique. in terms of what happens. The whole series of things that make. How in the hell did they get to RNA at the beginning out of a non-molecular or non-organic universe? All these miracles that did it. And then on the
give our species 5 billion years to figure out how to make something happen.
We might finally get it right to.
That's a lot of time. At the rate we're going, we got a good shot.
Just really quick, if you have like yin and yang and that sort of thing, and I don't want to go, yin and yang. That's an escape boat. That's a life raft off the Titanic that can be picked up by something that we don't know out into the great ocean of the universe, or something that could continue. But if they have a thing equally significant, but the destruction of the scenario, we reached a point, and this is the year 2015 of the Christian era or something, it's not 1,000, 2,000 years ago. What would be equally existential alteration in terms of mankind's ability to transform the environment than the destructive scenario that can be modeled, that we finally come to in a world where geopolitically, the means by which political identity and the institutions that give identity to people, that's very important, have been established in a geopolitical sense. The thing that made it possible for one person or one group or one nation or something to assume legitimacy to the rest of the Homo sapiens was whoever had the biggest club. Whoever had the military power to enforce their conquest. First law of international law is the right of conquest. If you're advanced, you go conquest the other. And then you set up yourself as the king. And that's the history of mankind. You have a few people who are doing very, very well, and the masses are serfs or serving as servants in the court of the kings who rule and everything. What kind of an alteration ontologically in terms of being able to see the number, the life support capability able to be provided to everybody in a way, instead of out of a context of scarcity, there's not nearly enough, so for one to win, the others have to lose. Could there be any alteration on that side of reading the anticipatory design science capability of arriving at a liberating capability of humanity that would create a resonancy or a synergistic resonancy of universe that would bring us into the universe in a level transcendent what we've been 200,000 years? Is there any point in thinking about maybe we've transcended scarcity or something along that line that would make possible a world of justice for all and a synergistic resonancy of an integrated humanity, everybody involved, everybody important, everybody having a sense of identity and security?
Well, this is where...
We only got 2 minutes. We got a minute and a half left.
Minute and a half? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where, and bring it back to where we started, this is where the ethics is so important, right? Because if we truly do care about everyone around the world, not just ourselves, then we don't need to compete in the same way that we do now. Instead, we can solve problems. We can figure out what the best ways are to distribute what resources we have in an equitable and in a productive fashion. And we don't need to worry so much about conflicts between different people or different countries or so on, because if the countries care about each other as much as they care about themselves, they're not going to fight. So if we can nail down the ethics, that's why it says, we start from the ethics. If we can nail that down, then a lot of other things become a lot easier.
Okay, well, that would be good. So it seems to me we have an ability to liberate or annihilate the Homo sapiens species. I would opt for the first. I think it'd be better to try and make these changes that have never been available to us out of history to create a really just system. And your work is really important. We got your site up, gcrinstitute.org, and your work is really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and give my best to all of your colleagues. Let us, by all means, be in touch in the time ahead.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Seth Baum, your pleasure to have had his perception. We're coming back again tomorrow, so please tune in then. And once again, Seth, thanks for all the good work. Keep on doing it. Okay?
Thanks for having me.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay. I think we're out. Okay.
Okay.
That's it. Okay.